Alright, today's a strange one. Just letting everyone know this entire video is the result of a comment, a singular comment. This guy posted this thing and I thought to myself, that sounds hilarious. Now I'm sitting here making an entire video on it. So if you ever have crazy ideas that you want me to look at, just tell me. No promises, but it does happen. With that said, I don't think it's hilarious anymore. Now I think it's fascinating and also probably terrible. Let's dive in. To begin, we need context. Something a lot of people might not know, the US Army has been systematically missing its own recruitment targets for years. Some people chalk this up to the growing distrust of institutions by Generation Z. Some people assign blame to COVID-19 and post-pandemic economic headwinds. But the simple truth is that nearly every branch of the United States military is failing to achieve target numbers for recruitment, some for the first time in decades. Where am I going with this? Well, to best explain that, I need to refine focus and talk about one particular segment of the military called the 4th Psychological Operations Group, 4th POG for short. 4th POG is best known for its emphasis on psychological warfare and was originally activated in 1967 during the Vietnam War. After a brief deactivation in 1971, it was reactivated again in 1972 and moved to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, later becoming an official branch of the US Army called Psyop in 2006, along with the 8th POG, both of which now fall under the 1st Special Forces Command. Boring? Yes. Relevant? Also yes. See, in May of 2022, the 1st Special Forces Command publicly released a recruitment video called Ghosts in the Machine Psywar. That video brazenly illustrates that psychological manipulation is a centerpiece of modern warfare and also emphasizes the new frontier of intelligence. One particularly striking visual comes when the evolution of warfare screens end in a close-up shot of a finger just mindlessly scrolling a smartphone, and the subtext of that visual is that the battlefield is now digital in our very pockets. Whether or not you believe that explicitly is up to you, but the simple truth is that the United States military is openly recruiting for its psychological warfare division, and it doesn't stop there. In July of 2020, after a damning report from The Nation, the United States Army drew criticism for its activity on the live streaming platform Twitch. What had been happening was a thinly veiled recruitment endeavor aimed at susceptible young men, primarily gamers, even so far as to offer fake giveaways that simply redirected them to the Army recruitment page. Quote, Twitch viewers in the Army's channel are repeatedly presented with an automated chat prompt that says they could win an Xbox Elite Series 2 controller, an enhanced controller with customizable options and extra paddles for advanced play that costs upwards of $200, and a link where they can enter the giveaway. It, too, redirects them to a recruiting form with no additional mention of a contest, odds, total number of winners, or when a drawing will occur. End quote. The military obviously distanced themselves from that narrative, but the giveaways that they ran were eventually suspended from the platform entirely for violating its terms, which was fairly definitive. According to Forbes, in 2020, military recruitment on Twitch may be controversial, but it isn't likely to stop anytime soon, and it turns out that their claim was absolutely correct. It wasn't until 2022 that we would begin to understand the full scope of their efforts, but when it happened, the picture was very, very distinct. In documents reviewed by Motherboard, it became clear that the US military was planning to pay streamers and influencers millions of dollars to reach Generation Z through video games like Call of Duty. Quote, the documents show that the US military considered gaming and, in particular, Call of Duty as a potentially useful branding and recruiting tool. For example, the Army proposed using Twitch influencers to create original content videos showcasing the wide range of skill sets offered by the Army, and to use influencers to familiarize their fans on Army values and opportunities. The Army also wanted to throw tournaments that featured soldiers and top names in gaming. Another goal of the campaigns was to increase the Army's favorability in viewer surveys. End quote. Remember that. Familiarize their fans on Army values and opportunities, as well as increase the Army's favorability. That's important. Now, personally, I would consider this logically obvious, but for those that don't see the connection, the US Army now has its own esports team. And why would that be? Because gamers are a hyper-susceptible and valuable demographic for the Army, the military in general, for a multitude of reasons. According to Jacqueline Wheatcroft, contained within research from the University of Liverpool's Institute for Psychology, Health and Society, which was designed to study whether or not gamers would be adequate military drone candidates, quote, we measured the personality constructs such as how conscientious they were, how agreeable they were, how open to experiences they were, their neuroticism, extroversion, and so on. What these tell us is how they are going to react in given situations, end quote. Her findings indicated that gamers were outscoring traditional aviation pilots, and while the research itself was far from comprehensive, the findings are not even unique. From CBC as far back as 2013, quote, video game players may be the ideal candidates to operate military drones, end quote, which was based on research done by Professor Missy Cummings at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The effort to recruit gamers by the military is actually so aggressive, the Air Force wanted to develop its own video game for the purpose of identifying and recruiting potential standout candidates. From military.com, in a statement given by Lieutenant General Stephen Quast, quote, "If they're interested in flying and they see this game the Air Force has, if I find a 15-year-old kid that's just brilliant, I'll probably send a message to that IP address saying, go tell your mom and dad that you are special and that I will offer you a $100,000 signing bonus and I will send you to Harvard for 4 years for free," end quote. My point is, the United States military has not only identified a demographic that is easily influenced, they have also demonstrated a sizable funding objective aimed at influencers and video games during a period of time where recruiting is progressively falling. In addition, they openly advertise and recruit on social media for the Psychological Operations Unit, Psychological Warfare, based out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So how does it all tie together, and how could I ever possibly justify the video's title? For that, we need to talk about an influencer named Hailey Lujan. Hailey Lujan initially began posting on TikTok during 2020, mostly doing random skits, song voiceovers, etc., and jumping on popular trends. However, in 2021, she started intermittently posting footage of herself in military attire, and then in September of 2022, it became effectively her only content. Now, when I say military attire, I don't mean camo you just buy at Walmart. I mean her casually playing with multi-$100,000 DoD drones, or doing TikToks from inside Apache helicopters. See, she has legitimate access to military tech on a level that civilians just don't, and from there, it only gets stranger. Back in 2019, before she got popular on TikTok and Instagram, a comment emerged where she claimed to be stationed at Fort Bragg, and even directly stated that she was training to be a psychological operations specialist. A little bit more poking around, and one can find a LinkedIn profile with her name and picture, listing her occupation as a psychological operations specialist since July of 2019, and the list goes on. It actually isn't even really a novel phenomenon at all. For the past few years, a bevy of young Israeli, female, attractive IDF soldiers have been posting relentlessly on TikTok, influencing public perception of IDF forces, some of them even featured on the official IDF social media pages themselves. Israel is quite active on social media, historically launching influence campaigns during key moments with mixed results. One such report from the Associated Press in March of 2023 outlined a campaign that failed to gain traction using fake social media profiles on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Hailey Lujan produces content that explicitly tells her followers, don't go to college, become a farmer, or join the military. She seems to have fully embraced the culture of conspiracy, even posting jokes about how the US military spends $100 million on advertising, only to be outdone by a 21-year-old girl with a TikTok. And the videos produced on her YouTube channel are steeped in internet meme culture with an emphasis on lonely men. Sure, it's a booming industry right now. Young men are currently more lonely, isolated, and self-conscious than ever before, which makes them extremely susceptible to manipulation. But let's remember the full context. Hailey Lujan is posting cutesy videos of military equipment and promoting different branches in the comments, while tagging videos with phrases like, the best job in the world. Remember, as cited in the documents obtained by Motherboard, the US military explicitly wants influencers to create videos showcasing the wide range of skill sets available in the military, familiarize their fans with opportunities, like flying an Apache helicopter maybe, and increase the Army's favorability. A Psywar specialist, shortly after moving to none other than Fort Bragg, where the 4th Psychological Operations Group is based out of, which is a unit that already openly recruits for psychological warfare on social media, cultivates an audience very, very quickly on social media, suddenly pivoting into military hardware demonstrations and recruitment videos aimed at lonely men online, and her personal website is even called Psyops. The military branch that she herself seems to be a part of describes the skill set of their soldiers in the following way. Quote, "These soldiers are known for their communication expertise, using unconventional tactics to persuade and influence foreign allies and enemies in support of U.S. Army objectives." End quote. What does that sound like? Well, it sounds like the e-girl warfare conspiracy theory. At the end of the day, I can't say for sure. At the very least, this is an influencer who is being allowed special access to use and film herself with large-scale military hardware, then posting it all over social media for her fans and the world. She has fully embraced the culture of conspiracy, again at the very least, leaning into the idea that all of it is just psychological manipulation, openly. And maybe it's just an example of someone finding a profit mechanism and sticking to it. She is, after all, showing up in very odd places, like a penthouse party with Donald Trump Jr., so that's something. But again, at the end of the day, I can't say for sure. Or, and this is where we take the leap and give into the conspiracies just a bit, or she's a crafted product of the US military, which has demonstrated a very obvious goal of reaching young men through social media, first with gaming, now with secondary means, and the campaign has been so successful, they don't even need to hide it, because the worst thing that happens is people just joke around about it, subsequently making her even more famous as she incrementally changes public perception of the military simply by way of her very existence. The commodification of e-girls is a very real thing, when relevant video game genres such as first-person and tactical shooters are skewed to a 93, even 96% male-to-female ratio, according to data from Quantic Foundry. A large proportion of modern terminally online gamers, for lack of a better term there, are almost never interacting with women. Instead, there is a trend of parasocial relationships forming, where an influencer wields excess power over the emotional state and decision-making process of their audience, despite that relationship existing in only one direction. I have to just ask this flat out. Why wouldn't a declining military that is failing to meet its own recruitment benchmarks for the past few years turn to this highly valuable, parasocially crippled demographic and influence them to join with non-traditional tactics? Why wouldn't they simply reframe their approach and use a new method that avoids typical pitfalls, while simultaneously putting an entirely different and freckled face on the industry, and at the same time appeal directly to an introverted demographic that they have been aggressively chasing since the early 2000s, all at once? The answer is that they have absolutely no reason not to do that. Honestly, at the end of the day, I just don't know, but after that guy commented about the e-girl military recruitment trend, I never expected it to actually become a real fascinating story. That's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. If you want to use a VPN, everybody can use a VPN. Make sure to use my link. It's there, big discount. Also locals, Patreon, memberships, etc., but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.